How streaming killed traditional television. Imagine sitting down on a Tuesday night, flipping through channels, waiting for your favorite show to start at precisely 8 o'clock. You plan your entire evening around that 1 hour. Miss it, and you miss it forever. That was the reality for billions of people for nearly 6 decades. Then, almost overnight, everything changed. Streaming didn't just offer a new way to watch television. It fundamentally dismantled the entire system that traditional broadcasting had spent half a century building. This is the story of how that happened, why it was inevitable, and what it means for the future of entertainment. To understand what streaming destroyed, you first need to understand what traditional television actually built. The broadcast television model emerged in the late 1940s and solidified throughout the 1950s. Networks like NBC, CBS, and ABC controlled everything. They decided what you watched, when you watched it, and how many commercials interrupted your experience. This was called the appointment television model, and it was extraordinarily powerful. By the 1970s and 1980s, a single hit show could capture 40 to 50% of all American households watching at the same moment. The finale of MASH in 1983 drew over 106 million viewers simultaneously. That number represents a cultural synchronization that simply cannot exist today. Cable television arrived in the 1980s and began fragmenting audiences for the first time. Suddenly there were dozens of channels instead of 3. Networks like HBO, CNN, and MTV carved out specific audiences. But even cable operated within the traditional framework. Programming schedules still ruled everything. Advertisers still paid for access to eyeballs at specific times. The fundamental power structure remained intact. Networks controlled distribution, and viewers had no real choice but to comply with whatever schedule the network imposed. Then came Netflix. And nothing was ever the same again. Netflix launched its DVD by mail service in 1998, which was clever but not revolutionary. The true disruption came in 2007 when Netflix introduced streaming video on demand. For $8 a month, subscribers could watch licensed television content whenever they wanted. No commercials. No schedules. No waiting. The concept seemed almost too good to be true, and traditional media executives largely dismissed it as a niche product. CBS chief executive Les Moonves famously and repeatedly downplayed streaming's threat to traditional broadcasting. That dismissiveness would prove catastrophically expensive for the entire industry. The numbers tell a brutal story. In 2010, approximately 114 million American households subscribed to traditional pay television, representing the absolute peak of cable and satellite dominance. By 2023, that number had collapsed to roughly 55 million. More than half of all pay television subscribers simply vanished within 13 years. The industry term for this phenomenon is cord cutting, and it accelerated far faster than any analyst predicted. In 2023 alone, traditional pay television lost approximately 5 million subscribers in a single year. These are not people switching providers. These are people abandoning the entire traditional model permanently. The financial devastation extends beyond subscriber losses. Advertising revenue, the lifeblood of traditional broadcasting, began migrating toward digital platforms at staggering speed. In 2012, television advertising in the United States totaled approximately $78 billion. By 2022, that figure had shrunk considerably while digital advertising had exploded past $200 billion. Brands followed audiences, and audiences had followed streaming. The mathematical foundation of the entire traditional television business model simply evaporated. What made streaming so devastatingly effective was not simply convenience, although convenience mattered enormously. The deeper weapon was data. Traditional networks operated essentially blind. They relied on Nielsen ratings, a sampling methodology that estimated viewership across the entire population by monitoring a small representative panel of households. Netflix knew exactly what every single subscriber watched, when they watched it, how many times they rewatched specific scenes, where they paused, and where they stopped watching entirely. This data advantage allowed streaming platforms to make decisions that traditional networks could never have made. The clearest example of this advantage is House of Cards, Netflix's landmark original production launched in 2013. Netflix didn't commission a pilot episode and test it with focus groups the way traditional networks had operated for decades. Netflix analyzed its viewing data, recognized that subscribers loved Kevin Spacey, loved David Fincher's directorial style, and loved the original British version of House of Cards. Netflix committed $100 million to 2 full seasons before a single frame was filmed. This was considered reckless by Hollywood standards. It was actually the most rational decision possible when you possess complete audience intelligence. House of Cards proved that streaming originals could compete with premium cable content. But the real turning point came in 2019 when Netflix released Stranger Things and demonstrated that streaming could generate genuine cultural moments comparable to the appointment television era. Suddenly everyone was talking about the same show simultaneously even though they weren't watching it simultaneously. Social media replaced the broadcast schedule as the mechanism for cultural synchronization. You didn't need to watch something at 8 o'clock Tuesday. You needed to watch it before social media spoiled every major plot development. The streaming wars that followed fundamentally reshaped the entire entertainment industry. Disney launched Disney Plus in November 2019 and acquired 10 million subscribers within its first day of operation. HBO Max launched in 2020, Peacock launched in 2020, Paramount Plus expanded significantly, Apple TV Plus entered the market. Suddenly every major media company was building or acquiring a streaming platform because the alternative was irrelevance. The traditional networks and studios found themselves in a deeply contradictory position. They needed to destroy their own most profitable business model before someone else destroyed it for them. This process, which economists call disruption and media executives call the streaming pivot, required massive capital investment at precisely the moment when traditional revenue streams were collapsing. Disney spent billions building Disney Plus while simultaneously watching ESPN's cable subscribers decline. Discovery and Warner Media merged specifically to pool resources for the streaming battle, creating Warner Bros. Discovery at enormous financial cost. Paramount Global spent aggressively on Paramount Plus while its legacy cable networks hemorrhaged value. The traditional media companies were essentially funding their own replacement. The human cost inside these industries proved severe. As streaming platforms invested in original content, they simultaneously demanded cost efficiency. Traditional broadcast networks that once employed thousands of writers, producers, and crew members for episodic television began operating with smaller budgets and shorter seasons. The streaming model favored limited series of 8 to 10 episodes over traditional broadcast seasons of 22 to 24 episodes. This meant fewer working weeks for crew members, fewer opportunities for writers, and a fundamental restructuring of how television careers operated. The 2023 writers' strike and actors' strike were direct consequences of this economic transformation, with creative professionals fighting to establish fair compensation rules in a streaming environment that had initially refused to share viewership data or guarantee minimum payments. Perhaps the most profound change streaming introduced was the death of the shared cultural moment in its traditional form. When 106 million Americans watched the MASH finale in 1983, they experienced something simultaneously. When 82 million households watched the Seinfeld finale in 1998, that represented one of the last truly massive synchronized cultural events in American television history. Streaming fragmented the audience not just across different platforms, but across different release windows and binge schedules. Even when Netflix releases an entire season simultaneously, viewers consume it at radically different speeds. Some finish in a weekend. Some spread episodes across months. The common reference point becomes muddier, more complex, ultimately less powerful. The irony is that streaming platforms recognized this problem and began experimenting with weekly episode releases to artificially recreate appointment viewing. Disney Plus released episodes of The Mandalorian weekly. HBO Max released episodes of Succession and House of the Dragon weekly. These decisions were explicitly designed to extend cultural conversation and prevent subscriber cancellations between major releases. Streaming had killed the broadcast schedule only to partially resurrect it as a strategic marketing tool. Traditional television is not completely dead. Live programming, particularly sports, news, and award ceremonies, remains one area where broadcast and cable maintain genuine competitive advantages. The Super Bowl still draws over 100 million simultaneous viewers. Major news events still pull audiences toward traditional broadcast infrastructure. Sports rights have become the most valuable asset in all of media precisely because live sports represent one form of content that streaming has not yet fully captured.